Joining me now to discuss key legislative priorities as members of the National Assembly resume from recess with focus on the proposed amendments to the Electoral Act. I have Oluwole Osaze-Uzzi. He's a former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Edo State. Also former Director of Publicity and Voter Education, INEC, that's Independent National Electoral Commission. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you, sir. Okay, so you listened to, first day of resumption by the Senate there, and we didn't hear much about the Electoral Act or see the urgency that is required, considering that the House of Reps have already passed, waiting for, the Senate to,
consider,
to also act, timelessly. Now that they've resumed, what should be their priority, especially now that we've not even heard much about the electoral?
Well, the truth of the matter is that the Senate ought to have passed the act
already before now.
Even by their own timelines. Recall that the Senate leader, Senator Okweyemi Bamidele, had said in October of last year that before the year runs out, that's 2025, the Senate was going to pass, the National Assembly, in fact, but of course, his Senate leader was speaking on behalf of the Senate, said the Senate was going to pass the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2025.
Right.
So he assured us that they were going to, and reassured us when they were swearing in the new INEC chairman. I think that assurance was also given that before the end of the year. Somehow it came, it passed. There was a joint public hearing, and the House of Reps fed to them. Were able to consider the answer, I think, on the 23rd, but in December passed their own version of the bill. Yeah. But the Senate did not do so. So one would have thought that it will be in the front burners. That's probably the most important, one of the most important things that they should have, because of the urgency, because of the legal, statutory, and constitutional deadlines that have to be met. And also international protocols that Nigeria is party or signatory to. So you ought to settle your legal regime, legal framework for conduct at least 1 year, well ahead of time. But 1 year is like a flexible guideline that they give us. You should settle these things, and people should be certain, because INEC also has to plan. The guidelines, the regulations may have to be amended in line and bring them in line with the electoral framework, with the Electoral Act. So, but you must pass the Act first. You cannot do anything about the guidelines until and unless you have passed the Act, so that you don't do anything that is contradictory to it, and you give life and blood to the Act. So one would have thought it's almost inertia, really. But I'm not surprised that a lot of civil societies and commentators are reading meanings into it, that maybe this was a self-setting, selfish interest.
Which leads me to ask, why do you think that the Senate is stalling on the issue of, this Electoral Act? Do you think it's deliberate, or what could be going on? And alongside that, how much window really do we have?
Not much. Hardly any window. I think the circumstantial evidence seems to be that it's a deliberate ploy. One would not have wanted to do so, but one doesn't. It's not an armor to conspiracy theorists. But when you see all these things happening, how they unfold, what other reason? It's not mentioned. But the Senate majority that had yesterday made reference to it, that it will be part of the legislative agenda and its topmost priority. But what is disturbing to people like us who observe these matters is that, look, there are 2 or 3 major things. I think the agricultural thing is there. It was talking of the budget still has to be considered. Right. The tax issues and the Tax Act and whatever it is has to be, then you are talking of the Electoral Act. That ought to have been, it was in the order paper of, I think, the first week, about 3rd of December last year. So it was going to be considered, but it was never mentioned. So why do you not do this? So when people have to say, there is a hidden agenda.
What are the consequences of this slowdown?
Well, we do have...
And what would it mean if we have to actually fall back on the Electoral Act 2022?
Yes. Yes, correct.
Which is what we're...
Well, you just answered. That's the consequences that will not have to fall back there. But don't forget that a lot of commentators, a lot of lawyers, a lot of civil society people, the media, have said that Nigerians saw the flaws in the Electoral Act of 2022. We saw the issues. Even the National Assembly, recall that when they passed the Act, then they now found that they excluded certain statutory delegates who ought to be delegates at national conventions. And they tried to send it back to Buhari for an amendment, even fresh out of the bakery, which he said no. And to be fair to him, he said, no, this is too close to the election. We shouldn't be doing this.
Very quickly, the issue of defections, we're supposed to discuss that. We have barely a minute or two to look at that. Yes. There's this growing wave of defections across parties, especially from opposition parties to the governing party. Yes. Should there be some kind of law that does not go against, the Constitution to say, hey, if you were voted into office on the platform of Party A. If you want to jump to Party B, please leave the office so that Party A, which, according to, which sponsored the, the ticket, holds on to the office. What do you make of this? Should that be the case?
It makes a lot of sense. And the Supreme Court, the courts have told us that votes belong to parties.
To the parties.
And party, you must be sponsored by a political party.
Right.
So it's not morally, it's not illegal. Morally, it's, for legislators, it's legal as well. That once you cross over, you must leave your seat. The seat should be declared vacant. But then again, who declares the seat vacant? The presiding officer. The presiding officer is a beneficiary of that because they are coming to his party, so he will not declare the seat vacant. Right. So you have to go the full hog of going to court and everything else. And it's curious that it's just for legislators. But because of our experience in the First Republic, when people cross capability, the parliamentary system and the executive functions and the children were fused in the parliamentary system. Right. So when we did the 1999 Constitution and introduced this, unfortunately, the framers did not advise their minds that governors or presidents or other executive
possibility of that
can actually cross over. They should lose their seats. There's no reason why legislators should lose their seats and not people who hold executive positions.
Yeah,
I suppose
we'll have to leave it there. Wish we had all the time. Oluwole Osaze-Uzzi, thank you so much for joining us. Former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Edo State.